the frozen army of the Korean War. In the winter of 1950, during the Korean War, American and Allied forces encountered a sight so disturbing and surreal that many veterans would remember it for the rest of their lives. Hundreds of Chinese soldiers, standing, kneeling, even mid-stride, were found frozen solid in the snow,
fire, get closer.
Weapons still clutched in their hands. They had not been killed by bullets or artillery. They had been killed by the cold. This is the story of the so-called frozen army of the Korean War and the brutal power of what soldiers would later call the Wonder Cold. The road to disaster. The Korean War began in June 1950 when North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and Communist China, invaded South Korea. North Korean forces rapidly pushed south, capturing Seoul and driving Allied defenders all the way to the port city of Busan. In response, the United States organized a United Nations force made up of troops from 16 countries under the overall command of U.S. Army General Douglas MacArthur. In September 1950, MacArthur launched a bold amphibious landing at Incheon. The operation was a success. North Korean supply lines collapsed and UN forces surged north, retaking Seoul and driving the enemy toward the Chinese border. By October, UN commanders believed the war was nearly over. They were wrong.
Advancing to the Yalu. In October 1950, the U.S. 1st Marine Division, commanded by Major General Oliver P. Smith, landed at Wonsan on Korea's eastern coast as part of the U.S. Army's X-Corps under General Edward Almond. The plan was ambitious, a double envelopment that would crush remaining North Korean forces between advancing UN units and push them back across the Yalu River, the border with China. But China had other plans. On November 25, 1950, Mao Zedong ordered a massive intervention. More than 300,000 Chinese People's Volunteer Army troops secretly crossed into North Korea, launching a surprise offensive that caught UN forces completely off guard. The conflict that followed became known in China as the Battle of Lake Changjin, and in the West as the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir.
The Wonder Cold. As fighting intensified, a powerful Arctic front swept down from Siberia. Temperatures plummeted with terrifying speed, from near zero to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit and Celsius in a matter of hours. They stayed there for weeks. Weapons froze, lubricants turned to jelly, wounded men froze to death before medics could reach them. Even simple tasks, loading a rifle, tying a boot, became life-threatening. Allied forces suffered horribly, but the Chinese suffered far worse. An army unprepared. Chinese commanders expected a quick victory. Many of their troops wore thin cotton uniforms, rubber-soled shoes, and carried limited winter supplies. They had little shelter and almost no protection against extreme cold. As UN forces attempted to break out from encirclement at Chosin, Chinese units were ordered to block their retreat and hold positions at all costs. Some of those units never moved again. The frozen soldiers. As Marine reconnaissance units advanced, including forces under the legendary Colonel Louis Chesty Puller, they encountered a scene that defied belief. Hundreds of Chinese soldiers stood frozen in place, perfectly preserved by the cold. Some were kneeling in firing positions, others stood upright with rifles aimed. A few appeared to be running. Several still held grenades in their hands. There were no signs of combat, no shell craters, no bullet wounds. They had frozen to death where they stood. These soldiers belonged to multiple units, including elements of the Chinese 9th Army Group, forces that had been ordered to ambush and delay the Marines at all costs. The cold had arrived first. Chinese accounts. Years later, Chinese commanders confirmed what Allied troops had seen. General Song Shi-lun, commander of the Chinese Ninth Corps, reported to Beijing. After the battle started, no one in the company stood up. When the battlefield was cleared, all soldiers were found frozen to death in battle formation. There were no signs of fighting. Another officer, General Qi Shun-chin, later recalled, although more than 60 years have passed, the Battle of Chosin remains unforgettable. The cold was our deadliest enemy. Survival against the odds. Despite being surrounded, outnumbered, and nearly frozen themselves, the U.S. Marines executed one of the most remarkable fighting withdrawals in military history. General Oliver Smith ordered a breakout, not a retreat. Over 70 miles, the 1st Marine Division fought its way to the port of Hungnam, evacuating tens of thousands of troops and civilians under fire. The Marines had not been defeated. They had survived. A lesson written in ice. The frozen army of the Korean War stands as a grim reminder that nature can be as deadly as any enemy. Weapons, numbers, and strategy meant little against the raw power of extreme cold. For the Chinese soldiers who froze where they stood, the war ended without a single shot fired. And for those who witnessed it, the image of an army turned to ice would never fade. This has been History Did That. If you found this story informative, please like, subscribe, and share. Leave your questions or episode ideas in the comments, and stay informed.